Hello, everyone, and welcome to TableTakes. I am the Mike Robles. Joining me this week is Tifa, Emma, and Christian. Christian, welcome back.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
We missed you last week.
I missed me last week, too.
We had fake Christian last week, and that was good.
Oh, yeah. Who played fake Christian?
No idea. Gone.
Well, I'm sure he was excellent.
He was all right. Let's jump right into it. We've got a bunch of headlines we're going to talk about. This is your only source for gaming news. The hottest takes from the coolest people. Starting up, first thing we got going on here is Bandai announced a Naruto and Boruto card game. Which is awesome. For those of you that don't know, you said you've watched like half of it?
Okay, so I watched...
You're the expert now because you watched something.
No, I didn't. I watched the timeline that's like the 10,000 years of Naruto history, going all the way back to when Idira and Shinira...
You're just making up words now, aren't you?
Shinira got the animals sucked into their souls.
I
with
understood
all the,
the words animal
This sounds like
souls.
Power Rangers to me, and I'm totally in.
Naruto Shippuden is an anime. It's a manga. I believe part of the One Piece. I'm playing a game called Jump Force, which has a bunch of animes flying together as a fighting game. So I know Naruto's in there. This is going to be a card game, a deck builder, designed by Ryan Miller, who's designed a ton of games. He did Kaijudo. He's worked for Wizards of the Coast. He's gone off onto his own and done a bunch of games on his own. So this is a deck building game. There's going to be two essentially versions of the game. One featuring Naruto, one featuring Boruto. You can combine the two, we think.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of news on it, but
Little intergenerational battles. Nice.
Yeah.
And it's expandable, like Star Realms or a Hero Realms.
Yeah.
So
no,
you have
as somebody who's always wanted to fight his own grandfather, I can say that I would totally be into that.
That's looking to come out in June, right around my birthday time. We'll test it. We'll check it out. Because then I can fight my son. I can fight my own son. It'd be great.
I think you'd
Will he
win
be able
at
to
this
hold the
stage.
cards at that point? Just put the cards in front of him.
He holds cards now.
Yeah.
He turns on the Xbox on his own. He grabs it and
with you
sits
guys
down.
as parents, I imagine he even holds the cards the right way.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, they're got them mixed up by lands and sorceries.
Play order proceeds clockwise.
Probably,
It's like his.
So we learned how to use a clock, unlike every other child in America who's just like, what is that round thing?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Next up, White Wizard has announced Sorcerer, a character building game.
Character building, like it makes you a better person.
Yes.
Like that's what I think when I see that. It's like I'm an
If
upstanding.
you play this game, you would probably give to more charities, be healthier, happier, and better looking.
So this is sort of a game. This is
That's what I forgot.
You have a deck of cards. You have different decks of cards, and you can sort of like play them out in combination, and you can have what do we got here?
There's 64 possible deck combinations.
Right, so 64 characters.
And it's combining like strategy card games with tactical board games, which is really interesting. And the goal is to like create the best sorcerer.
Sweet.
I am just going to regurgitate what Derek said earlier, which is why don't you just play D&D? I mean, it makes a lot more sense.
Well, you can build this character and then take it into D&D campaign.
So if you don't have the time to play D&D, you can just throw out some cards.
Well, you say that, but it's actually designed by two former Magic players, Magic pros.
Which means it'll be very complicated, and I'll be dead in 4 turns.
I mean, but there's a caveat to that. With as a person who is just starting a new D&D campaign, with my human character urchin who was raised by a gnome and now has a gnome name and has embodied the spirit of adventure of a gnome but isn't actually a gnome, and that's just a part of it. There's a lot going on, so if you can take cards, just take the decks, throw them together, have different things, then
But is it going to give you that rich, detailed backstory? Like, I don't even know what your race and class is, but I know all about your character.
Yeah. It's, you have to... I don't know about the backstory.
Side tangent, I love that you went there with your character, because I once played in a D&D campaign where I was a dwarf that thought he was a giant. And so but he actually had giant power, so when he got bigger as a giant, he was just normal human size.
Nice.
But he was like, I am massive and I am giant now.
See, I try not to play characters with any mental illnesses that I don't already possess. So most of them just have delusions of grandeur.
That's why I love playing Vampire Masquerade.
I know, right? Malkavian all the way.
There you go. We
And
mentioned
then just play yourself and see what's crazy about them. I'm not really sure, but it creeps me out.
coming out, Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering have announced so many things as they continue to do so. What do we got? Wow, we got Challenger decks coming in 2019. This is 2019. The Challenger deck for 2019 coming out in April, and then one for War of the Spark coming out in May. One of you two want to talk about what Challenger decks are?
Yeah, so Challenger decks are a pre-built deck that people can grab and immediately play in a standard event at Friday Night Magic. We were having some interesting discussion. I think it's a very important product for players who are newer and want to jump into the game without having to go research a bunch of cards and or purchase an entire deck from scratch. It's an easier way to jump into tournaments. But
I've had an emotional roller coaster about it. Like when I first heard about it, like a year ago or so, when they first came out with Challenger decks, I was like, how is that even going to work? It's going to tank the secondary market because these cards are a lot cheaper. Like you can get a deck for, I think it was like $40 or $50. And it's got like the kind of deck to put together card by card on the secondary market. It could cost like $100 or more. So these are competitive, like really good decks.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how's it going to work? Is it going to like completely change the face of the secondary market? It didn't really. I think the lower kind of quantity, like people weren't buying these up and like reselling and like completely changing the landscape. So once they came out, I'm like, okay, this is cool. You know, these are actually powerful. They're not trying to trick us into like, oh, this is like not even a good meta deck.
Right.
Those are the kind I used to buy.
Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, this is
basically unplayable, and I just paid $50 for it. That's
I think
awesome.
it took them a long time to get there. Like they worked for a long time to try to get like event decks to that point.
Yeah. And it's okay if you understand that it's a limited time investment. Like this thing will be good for like about a year or so until the sets rotate again. So if you're willing to pay $50 and maybe like tweak some of the cards, like it is a good thing. It's a little weird from a retail perspective because we definitely had some of those coming up on the set rotation at Mox where it was like, well, what are we going to do? Like, I don't want to sell them to people. I'm like, oh, this is only going to be good for a few years. So it's weird.
Well, and also there's usually like one challenger deck that's like the best one.
Oh, well,
so then retailers end up with these challenger decks that like nobody wants.
I find it really interesting that you mentioned this, like, oh, you know, you're paying $50 for about a year's worth of content and playing.
Yeah.
I play video games. I'll buy Call of Duty.
Yeah.
I'll spend $50-$60, play it for about a year, and then towards the end, I know a new Call of Duty's coming out.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
the same. It's basically the same price. You're getting a lot more play out of it because you can play against different people.
Yeah.
It's a nice cheap buy-in, and it only lasts a year. But how long does your phone last?
Right. Yeah. In addition to those products announced, sort of the standards that have been coming back out, Core Set 2020 was announced July 12th.
I am a huge core set fan. I love core sets.
Glad they're back.
And this is going to have all the good stuff: the Planeswalker decks, booster packs, deck builder's toolkit, pre-release packs, themed boosters, just all the stuff you come to expect from a core set or a Magic release. Also announced Commander 2019, August 23rd. There's going to be 100-card Commander decks, oversized card, double-sided tokens, deck storage, strategy insert, reference guide. Again, all the stuff.
The oversized card always threw me.
So you just throw
How do I shuffle this?
Well, yeah, for Commander, you don't actually shuffle it in, but it is a thing for like transportation. You know, I always feel like, where do I put this? Like, how do I keep it safe and get like a little book or like press it in a...
Why don't they have a giant card cover that comes with the pack for
a giant sleeve? They sell giant sleeves.
A giant
have to get,
sleeve
like, a
with 99 other sleeves of a smaller size. So
There you go.
it's a Commander deck. I'm actually going
actually-
to invent this and make it right now. So
Yeah, do it.
Nobody else do it. Thank you.
Also announced Wizards of the Coast Modern Horizons. Modern Horizons is a straight to modern set. It's sort of replacing the Masters sets that they've done the last couple of years. And it's going to be a reprint of some never before released in modern cards, and then some new cards. They showed off 2 preview cards. One a modern reprint, Cabal Therapy. I don't remember what it does, and then a new card, which is essentially Sarah Angel, the card.
It is Sarah Angel.
It is Sarah Angel.
Not just essentially, but in fact.
In Planeswalker form.
She's a Planeswalker now.
Well, it's about time. She has worked so hard in those little white decks all these years. I am so glad that she's finally come up in the world.
Ascended, if you will.
Welcome to Ascension, Planeswalker.
So look for that later this year. In fact, I believe the Magic Fest Seattle that's happening is going to be revolving around Modern Horizons.
I just want to draft it.
Yeah, go to Magic Fest Seattle when that happens. in a few months. Speaking of Wizards of the Coast, D&D is doing an adventure collection, The Ghost of Salt March. And Christian, you were so excited about this.
This is so cool. Okay, so one of the things that this is doing, it's basically a collection of adventures that has a sea theme to it. So ghosts, pirates, plus almost the entire U series from the old D&D adventures, which were the Underwater series. Yeah. Very cool set of adventures. A little bit non-standard from what you're used to playing, also including pirates and ghosts and cool stuff underwater. So.
Yeah, just like Sea of Thieves, you know, that's
right,
basically...
except with elves and dwarves and magic and cool stuff, and the people who are on your crew aren't necessarily moronic children who can't drive a boat.
Oh, man.
Someone's been playing an awful lot of Sea of Thieves.
No, I played an awful lot of Sea of Thieves for about 2 weeks, and then I decided I hated children.
Look, I am not a child. I can drive a freaking boat, okay? I can row. Rowing is hard. You have to do the one oar and then the other oar. It's a very complex procedure.
I really
Send your
want
gamer
to
tag. I like hanging at the map. That's me. Navigator.
All right. Anyways, if that's coming later this year, it sounds actually really exciting.
I want to
It's a really good collection of adventures, and I'm glad that they've updated it for modern D&D. It's worth picking up or at least looking at.
We'll replace one of the Friday shows with you running us through an hour adventure.
Oh, bud.
Oh my gosh.
You would have such a good time.
Yes, please.
That'd be
I want
great.
to go to there.
Kristen's like, stop, Mike. We need to.
Because I will start right now. I have my DM screen.
Mike needs to shut up right now. WizKids has announced they're partnering with Hasbro on more licenses, and so there was a little bit of I don't want to say confusion. Where it's unclear because
from the Instagram post, it seems like these were mostly minis.
Right.
So like WizKids is known for minis, but these are specifically like G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, and Transformers minis. But because they also do games, we're saying, is this just the minis? Are the minis going to go in a game? Are they going to have some like unholy mini game hybrid that is unknown?
We could just add them to the Hero Click set and have Pinkie Pie fight the Incredible Hulk.
When I think WizKids makes some really great board games.
Yes.
So that's where my brain immediately went. And like Wizards of the Coast hasn't always been the best at board game design. I feel like they've done better when they've had either specific teams hyper-focused on board games or when they've partnered with outside sources. So I'm excited to see what more this partnership is going to be.
Yeah.
So do we think that because this is happening, because Wizards is letting this other company work on these minis, maybe possibly board games, that there's a reason for it? Do you think because they want to rather shift their focus and focus solely on D&D, solely on Magic, and be like, this is what we're good at, let's just focus our efforts on these and have...
I do think that, but I don't think, I wouldn't call it a shift. I think they're realizing, like, they're very good at making TCGs, they're very good at making RPGs, focus in on that, find people who know how to do board games well, and lean on them.
Plus, they have a lot of big releases coming out this year. I mean, they started announcing stuff, early December, and have just been announcing stuff every single week. WotC's got stuff coming out all the time now, and it's good that they're focusing on it.
We basically have a Wizards section every episode where we're like, let's talk about what Wizards doing this week, but that's fine.
Sorry, I'm actually impressed with their work as of late. As a big poo-pooer of 4th edition. I can tell you, I really like where they're going.
You can't say poo-poo on the internet.
Oh, I assure you I can.
I believe it's like P-U-P-U. It's like poo-poo.
Yeah.
It's a exclamation.
From that other language I know.
Yeah, sure. Warhammer Age of Sigmar RPG has the Age of Sigmar cover has been revealed from Cubicle 7, and you got words.
Yeah. Well, this is the first. Okay, so I haven't played any of the like Warhammer Fantasy RPGs. I was stunned when I realized it was a thing at Mox. Like I was looking there, I'm like, Warhammer has a role-playing game, and you role-play in the universe of Warhammer. People were like, yeah, it's been a thing for a while, and it kind of blew my mind. But getting more into the flavor of the world, having my coworkers ad nauseum explain the complex, convoluted lore of both Warhammer and Age of Sigmar, I'm kind of excited. Like just seeing the characters and kind of the care they put into the world seems like it'd be a cool thing. And you can be a skink. You can be a skink star priest, which is
that's what you said.
The most adorable skink.
No, I got
It's
you.
a little lizard creature in like a little lizard face, and it has its like wizard robes.
Adorable,
Most adorable Age of Sigmar creature. You can fight me if you disagree.
I would.
Come at me.
She looks very strong.
Speaking of RPGs, we continue on with Numenera coming to D&D.
That's kind of a cool thing. I mean,
It's very interesting.
Numenera came out a couple of years ago. Monty Cook Games put it out, and Monty spent a lot of time on this game.
Yes.
Like, the world is very, very rich. It's all about kind of exploring the what used to be in a very advanced scientific or post-advanced scientific age. I was a big fan, and I bought the game, and I bought all the supplements for it, and it's sitting on my shelf, and none of us have ever played it. Reason being, it's very, very difficult to get a group of players to suddenly decide that they want to learn a new system.
Right.
Putting this world in Dungeons & Dragons, which most people who game already know how to play to some extent because you just roll that 20 and it's all right there, it's going to open up a lot of doors for it. And they've already done that in the past. They put out that video game that was very, very popular, Tides of Numenera, but this is a way to really get to play in that world without having to learn something brand new.
Right.
Other than the very, very complex world that is Numenera.
Right.
So you can look forward to this. It's coming to Kickstarter mid-March with a full release in 2020. It should be very, very interesting. Coming up, we've got a whole slew of Toy Fair announcements. Toy Fair, of course, is happening, and wow, do we have pages upon pages of stuff that was announced at Toy Fair. First company up, Calliope Games. They announced ShipShape. ShipShape is designed by Rob Davio. This is the third in what they're calling the Titan series, where they get a titan of the industry, a game designer, to create this. And this is a three-dimensional puzzle-based bidding game.
But not like an actual Titan.
But now, I mean,
Like not I mean, there's a few ways you go with that, but like a Greco-Roman
Three-dimensional
being
puzzle-based games.
puzzle-based bidding game.
Sounds really interesting. You're into puzzles.
Yeah,
You love puzzles,
I love puzzles and escape rooms and puzzle rooms. I'm all about.
This one actually looks really cool. So I've seen the images of this floating around, and I like that they're doing something really interesting with the three-dimensionality of it, and like having it be in the box. So the box is actually part of the game itself, where you're removing these tiles and digging down in there and like revealing things over time.
Can I fit in the box?
Probably.
Maybe once all the tiles are removed.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing I love, other than spending time putting a 2D puzzle together, it's trying to put together a 3D puzzle and making sure that I've got everything set up the right way.
Maybe
But it's a
gonna
game.
be- Yeah, but
Sure.
that's part of the fun. Maybe it's gonna be like Dice Forge, where they have some kind of like easy way to have it like set up. I would hope so, because there are like a lot of pieces and a lot of layers to it. So
But it's
I
a game.
hope they
Come on,
Consider
Russian
the-
roulette is a game.
the resetting factor, because that could definitely be a thing. You get everything out of this, like, okay, we got to put it back in the box.
I bet we could get a lot of viewers if we played Russian roulette.
Jeez,
Yeah, no, this isn't the show for that.
Can we do it with like cake though? Like
There you
whoever
go.
loses gets to eat cake.
You do the one with
instead of-
it's the chocolates. It's a bunch of chocolate bullets, and one of the bullets has a hot pepper inside of it.
Ooh.
All right.
chocolate.
Chocolate. Also from Calliope Games announced at Toy Fair, everyone loves a parade.
I feel like this is made for me. Like very
Let's-
specifically.
Let's talk about it.
Everyone loves a parade. It's a dice and card game about designing floats.
Like the kinds that are in the parades.
No one else is excited about
I'm-
this.
no, I'm-
but I am.
But you also have to.
I'm sharing your
tailor-
enthusiasm.
You have to tailor the floats for the audience's approval.
I built a float in high school.
Oh, that's awesome.
So does
yeah.
it depend on what kind of parade you're doing too? Like if it's a St. Patrick's Day parade, do you get penalized for
Or a
putting,
pride parade. Oh,
Right.
that would be fun to build.
use all of the colors?
There you go. This is going to be designed by Mike Mulvihill, who designed some Shadowrun stuff and some Mage Knight.
Which means it's going to be great.
Which means it's going to be great. Okay, I'm sold.
Yeah. And then finally from Calliope Games, Spymaster. Spymaster, created by Seth Johnson, has worked on HeroClix and Double Double Dominoes. And the way this was described is an I cut, you choose.
And can we go over the history again of the
That sounds
choose
like knife
mechanic?
fight rules.
Emma is convinced this is from King Solomon, being like, I will
No,
cut
it's
the...
King Mimim and
King
I'm like, it's a thing
Mimim.
from the Bible.
We will cut. So I cut, you chooses. We get the deck of cards, and then I will cut them into a certain spot, hand them over to Emma, and then Emma will decide who's going to get which batch of cards.
It's actually a really cool mechanic, and Derek was saying earlier, it's a little underutilized because it has a lot of like interesting, like what you put where, and then having to choose, and it makes things a lot more balanced for
It's
like.
factor fiction.
Yeah, Magic
For
players are like,
Magic players.
Magic players are like, oh, we got this.
Yeah.
We know how this works. We do this all the time in Magic. And then there's a meta game, which sounds just like the best thing in the world. And it's an advanced version where you try to piece together the game pieces that are clues in the game box, so then you can stop playing the game afterwards. To solve the game, you got to use the game box.
This is becoming a new thing.
This is not.
Oh no, wait, this is your thing.
So they made a board game into an escape room.
They made
just
a
for
board
you.
game into an escape room, which I'm just like, I'm trapped playing this game forever. Cryptozoic has announced a whole massive stuff. First things first, a bunch of Rick and Morty.
Let's just roll through it. Just roll through Rick and Morty.
Rick and Morty, Tales from the Citadel. It's the third game, the deck building game from the Rick and Morty series. Also uses the Cerberus engine. If you've never played with the Cerberus engine, it's a deck building engine that is used in the Street Fighter deck building game, the DC deck building game, the Cartoon Network deck building game. All these games can be connected together.
So you can play the game without being a huge Rick and Morty fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Good to know.
You can get in there and play the game and know the game and play it without having to be a huge Rick and Morty. You can, or combine the two. You can be like Rick and Morty meets Street Fighter. You can have Ken uppercut the crap out of Rick or Morty.
I would have, I would absolutely have Guile just beat the crap out of Pickle Rick.
This is the third game in the Cerberus engine Rick and Morty series. They also announced Look Who's Purging Now, based on the episode of The Purge. Where this is based on the Eggs and Empires game system, which none of us have played.
Yeah.
So take that.
We hear it's a game. That's our take.
So take that for what you will. If you liked that episode of the Purge episode and you like the Eggs and Empires, then this is going to be straight for you.
Eggs.
This mixes those two things.
Yeah. In some way.
They did announce, Cryptozoic announced the DC deck building game Rebirth. Rebirth is what it sounds like, a rebirth of the deck building. They have a lot of versions of the DC deck building game. And so
But it's legacy style.
this one is Legacy style. And
And Rebirth is based
Style,
on the comics event DC Rebirth that came out 2 years ago.
yes.
Gotcha.
And then there's also going to be sort of campaign mode this time. So it's going to be campaign mode Legacy style. However, unlike other Legacy games, you will not destroy anything this time. You can reuse the cards. You probably just get them
Which
out.
makes it worth buying.
I think I was like, it's legacy-esque. It's legacy
there you go.
adjacent.
Legacy
It's
adjacent.
legacy, but replayable.
Yeah, honestly,
People are
the only
freaked
thing that
out.
bugs me about legacy games is that they're not replayable. This kind of fixes that problem for me.
But that
I'll
was like,
still buy the legacy games
that was
too.
the whole thing. It was pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
It was like a whole new world. You rip cards up. The thing that gamers hate the worst, like hate the most, like traumatizing. I have not played one because I have not felt confident in my
No,
ability
it
to
hurts
like.
it hurts your feelings every
Oh
round.
gosh.
See, Legacy games for me started with the knife game back in the day. Like that was the first Legacy game.
Good old mumbly peg.
It's not.
Yeah, once
Not a
you
legacy game.
once you lost a finger, it was
That's
not
actually
coming
one of
back.
the ancient prehistoric games we've been planning on talking about.
Yeah.
That's right. We'll
Someday.
talk about that. We're almost at a half hour. That's not happening this week again. Next week on TableTakes. Spyfall.
Foreshadowing.
Another Spyfall game. The fourth Spyfall. There's so many spies. That is a lot of spies
Yeah.
happening. That is
A
the
lot of
fourth
spy stuff.
Spyfall game.
So what's different about this version?
this one
Yeah.
is Spyfall time travel.
Oh, well,
Spies through time.
Through time.
there you go.
I haven't played Spyfall. I actually like just by the something about the art and the setup and like there's all the little bags and stuff. It kind of turned me off. But reading the actual description of it, where it's like a fake artist goes to New York. Although that came a lot
That game,
afterwards. It's
like,
like,
it's real
oh,
good.
one of us just doesn't know where we are and is saying stuff. It's like, oh, have you looked at that painting? It's like, oh, we're in a museum. It's like, no, we're in the Yellow Submarine. I don't know, something like that.
So what
there's-
specifically turns you off about the game? Is it the card styles? Is it the art itself?
Well, there's first of all in the box. It's like every thing has like a set. So like the set of it, I've seen it like in Mox. We had a library copy, and just like getting it, so you're putting all the stuff into the little bags. And there's just like a ton of those little bags.
Okay.
And just looking at it, it's just like a lot of things. Like a game, like a lot of games, like you have the deck. You can kind of look through the deck, but this is very much like here's your little kit of things. Good luck
Here's your
with
bag.
this.
Don't lose anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you like Spyfall, time travel's coming. Spyfall time travel. And then coming up in probably what is the coolest death metal band name ever, Annihilageddon.
No, you guys,
That is amazing.
Very good.
yeah, there you go.
This is the fifth game in the epic spell wars of Battle Wizards. And here's something that I did not realize.
That sounds like magic.
Yeah,
right?
Kind of.
Epic spell wars.
I did not realize that Epic Spell Wars was on their 5th game. That is crazy.
Well known in the retail world for having absolutely illegible box art.
Oh,
If you
yeah,
want to
the
find
box
how many
art.
players that thing is, it's like,
Well, it's something to think about. Like, I always feel like, and even the art itself is very reminiscent of like Ratfink in the old like 80s like Hot Rod style.
absolutely.
Like, so Annihilageddon makes total sense for the name. In this version, and players will be able to attack each other directly. Epic Spell Wars, for those of you that may not know, is you essentially build a spell every turn, and you try to build a spell to do damage to other players and other wizards. That's it
So
for
this
Toy
time you
Fair.
can actually just punch him in the face.
There you go. Yeah, the cards will just let you physically attack one another.
Don't do that.
Please do not. You get thrown out of stores.
TableTakes does not condone violence of any kind.
Moving on, we got out of the Toy Fair announcements, we've got the D&D Young Adventurers guides that are coming. Yeah.
And
How
like
young?
Yeah.
How young? That's my question.
Why did you rub your hands together when you said that?
Because I want to get my 2-year-old into gaming already. That's really.
All right.
That's the
there,
answer.
there are options, and this is one of them.
And so these are going to have, this is going to be a nice way, it's not necessarily like adventures, it's almost like learning tools for young children.
Training wheels for RPGs. Yeah.
Or grooming was another word that came up. That's
This will include stuff like a flowchart to decide what kind of warrior you want to be. Challenge. Christian talked about flashcards.
You kind of like flashcards, yeah.
Like, all right, youngin, you get to this door. What do you do? If you're a warrior, it's like, I break it down. Just flip it over. Yeah, you do. You break it down.
That's right. Good job, warrior.
You do it.
Sorry, the correct answer was knock.
I ask it about its feelings. Is that,
You could do that if you're the right kind of wizard.
Yeah.
Sounds like we found the
Absolutely.
bard.
I speak to the door.
We found the bard.
Well, I think it's an interesting new take on acquisition. Like, get them when they're really young.
You just sink them in.
does the door want to be open? Sorry, I'm like so hung up
I was
on
still
this.
hung up on the door.
This is going to include warriors and weapons in one version, and then monsters and creatures in another. These are going to launch in July of this year, so look for that. It's going to be really neat. Coming up, Talisman, because we haven't mentioned Talisman at all this episode yet. So here it is.
What's a talisman?
The Talisman is a game, and that's all I know. I've never played it. I don't know what kind of game it is.
But we talk about it.
We talk about it all the time. I should probably... But you know what, though? If I'm going to play a game of Talisman, I'm going to play this one that was just announced from the op, Kingdom Hearts. A Kingdom Hearts edition of Talisman, designed
You heard it here.
by Elisa Teague, who
Awesome.
She worked with Lunch Art Games. She's got her own series of games out called Geek Out.
She published a book about women in tabletop.
Ooh.
Yeah. So she's done a lot. She knows her way around the gamosphere, and well as she's just a huge nerd in general. She's awesome.
You would have to be to combine Kingdom Hearts and board games.
Well,
It's just like, where do you even start?
It's like we said.
Not with the story, otherwise you'll get confused far too quickly.
Which makes it perfect for Talisman, is my guess. Like, it's just going to be a great match together.
I've just seen people posting on Twitter about that. It's like, if Donald Duck comes to me one more time and goes off on this whole thing that's a big thing apparently.
Yeah, I've
And you
been
can only
playing Kingdom
understand,
Hearts
a
3
third
for
of
a
his
while now,
words.
and it's very, very confusing, even though I've played most of the other games.
Yeah.
Agreed. Same way. Monster Fight Club, which is not a fight club for monsters, as I disappointingly found out. However,
Or like a Monsters Inc. Fight Club, over
Monsters
movie
Inc.
remake.
a
That's what he
mashup
thinks
of-
this could have been.
But it is none of those things.
Monsters Inc. Fight Club.
Yeah. Where Sully is like the... Oh, wait, I don't want to give spoilers.
You
I
can't.
guess.
No, you can't. All right.
You know what I'm trying... You know what I'm saying.
Right, so Monsters Fight Club is essentially a group of designers that are coming out with a bunch of games. In fact, the first one designed by Aaron Dill, who designed Spartacus, a game of blood and treachery, and Star Trek Ascendancy, has one called Tentacle Town.
It's not what you think it is.
Unless it is. We haven't played it.
This is going to be a resource management and worker placement game defending a town from a sea monster.
That actually
Oh.
sounds like a game I'd really like.
It does. It does.
But the
somewhat-
sea
it sounds
monsters is all
cooperative.
tentacles.
Yeah,
Most great sea monsters are, I have found.
that is
Yeah,
true.
that's fair.
Also coming out is Yuli. Yuli is an abstract game with an Aztec theme, and that's all we know.
Maybe there will be blood sacrifices. Probably
Or,
not.
abstract.
It's a game.
It's probably.
It'll probably be pretty.
yeah.
It might. And coming up still, we've got, as for Toy Fair releases, continuing Asmodee has one key.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this last week. We non-talked about it. We're like, I think it's a Mysterium thing, but we have a little more information now, which is cool. This like hot, cold clues where it's basically reverse code names because you're trying to pick all the things that aren't the keyword and get all the other stuff out of the way. So,
Which I'm in, like reverse code names. Is all I
Yeah.
need.
Yeah, no, that
Codenames.
sounds easy and fun.
yeah, like Dixit flavor, Mysterium flavor to it.
Not that
so.
the game itself won't be complicated and hard
Right.
to play, but like the idea of it. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, okay, I take these away when I guess them right. That's
Reverse code names. I find the assassin first.
There-
instead of I guessed it right. Now I have to take a token from this pile and a card from this pile and set up
Yeah.
for my.
Yeah.
Also coming down is Quirky Circuits from Plaid Hat Games. It's an adventure book game.
Flat Hat Games made Dead of Winter, one of my favorite games.
Made what?
Dead of Winter?
Dead of Winter.
It's so good. You would love this game.
Small side tab. Dead of Winter is a zombie apocalypse game. However, the zombies are sort of tertiary because you were in a compound, and the game is more about making decisions to survive rather than worrying about the zombies.
And human interaction and like
There are every
How far are you willing to
every
go?
turn you have to flip what's over as what's known as a crossroads card. So it's like, oh, you found a horse. You can keep the horse, and you can go from location to location without having to fight any zombies.
Or you can feed your town for a month.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got you.
Tough
I do
choices.
want to play that
The
game.
game.
There's Dead of Winter and then a sequel, The Longest Night. Anyways, so Plaid Hat Games is doing Quirky Circuits.
Probably a little less dark.
Part of the list. I almost said
little more quirky.
I almost said Quirky Circuities.
Circuities.
Because Derek has a great
Circuities.
typo. Circuities. Players are going to work together to program a robot to complete its task before its battery runs out. So to me, you say not as dark, but that's just going to make me sad if like the task is like hug. And the robot's like, I'm going to hug. Oh.
Robots running out of batteries seriously is
I
like
can make it
incredibly
dark.
sad. Now I'm like
I just
holding my
want to
tears in.
love.
I can't watch Wally.
But it's got a cool mechanic to it because you don't know what anyone else is doing, which you had mentioned is very thematic to tech development.
Exactly. You're all trying to build the same thing, but none of you are really allowed to talk about what you're doing with
Yeah.
each other. It's like having an actual middle manager in
Yeah.
the room.
Oh wow, yeah.
It's like, I'm going to turn on the robot. It's like, oh, I was just connecting these things and now I'm electrocuted.
We've missed our deadline because we got nothing done.
So that's coming out, continuing more down this Asmodee trail. Patchwork Doodle, a roll and write of the version of the game Patchwork.
Also, the name of a great gnomish bard.
It's Patchwork. I am Patchwork
Doodle.
The Ballad of Patchwork Doodle.
Doodle. That sounds great.
Apparently it's quilt themed,
Yeah.
if you're into that.
Yeah. Quilts. Quilts
That's-
great.
Does that not
You-
sound exciting to you?
draw.
Because like, after the parade floats, I'm thinking quilts. That sounds exciting.
Are you not just the craftiest person? You want a scrapbook game?
I
Is
don't-
that-
But
You are
this-
such a complicated person.
But this isn't because you draw your polyanimos because they're not
The girl who's polyanimal
tetranimos.
once.
Nice.
Haven't we all?
You have to draw the polyanimals instead of being able to.
The little thingies. You draw the
polyanimals.
thingies. You grab the
Instead of
thingies.
getting them, that's like a lot of
There you go.
Great.
complex
And lastly,
doodleography.
Doodleography. That's the name of Patchwork Doodle's album. Is Doodleography. And finally,
Now he sounds like a kid's musician.
yeah.
shaking his head.
Last from Asmodee, Wordsmith, which is moving letters or pieces of letters around a board to make words.
If you are dyslexic, I do not recommend this game.
We don't have more than that.
Yeah.
That sounds like a thing.
Words.
I said it.
Games.
I love word games, so I'm all about like us move letters around and like that's my jam.
We talked about last week the Harry Potter Scrabble that's coming out.
Harry Potter Scrabble.
That's where you just get to make up words and say Icus at the end of them, and all of a sudden
And
it's a
it'll
spell.
count. You can use the lexicon there.
Oh, you get to use the Harry Potter lexicon.
Yeah.
Good.
Good.
I do
don't know.
not fear for our youth.
I think I say Wordsy is the best word game of all time. So I don't know if we.
I'm a
really-
bananagram kind of guy.
The phone app, Wordsy? Or
No, not.
No, it's a game by Gil Hova, where it's really cool because there's letters out. You have to use those, but you can use any other letter too.
See, letters are always moving for me. So
In general.
these games are.
Yeah.
All right.
Why do they keep moving? Why can't they just stay in one place?
Bargain Quest. Is coming out with a webcomic expansion. So it's going to be 3 mini expansions. It's coming from Renegade Games.
Renegade Games is great.
Yes, they are. And they're going to have
Proved.
12 cards
Proved.
for 3 different webcomics. Acquisitions Incorporated, which we had a small discussion about, while not a webcomic, webcomic adjacent, and also featured in said webcomic. So they're going to have that. Table Titans, made by Scott Kurtz and Tavis Maiden, who's helped write for that. And then 8-Bit Theater. So those are all going to be released in May. With other previously announced expansions coming out. And finally, wrapping up our headlines, The Op has announced they're going to do versions of Clue and Monopoly based on the 2017 horror film It, which already made me think, wow, so they're going to do a version of Clue for It. Pretty sure we know who the killer is in that game.
It was the balloon.
It was the balloon.
I'm more concerned about Monopoly. That's just messed up. Do not float past go. It's just scary.
And like, what are it's going to be like? Creepy house, creepy sewers, bathroom where this person dies. Like, what
Yeah,
is gonna be-
instead of going to jail, like, you're dead.
Yeah.
You're dead.
Play elimination for this one.
Yeah,
Do
you
you
go-
buy the sewer? Do you like
Yeah,
set up
what are you
a
gonna
hotel
buy?
on the sewer?
You just go directly to deadlights.
And now you're undead.
There's a weird turtle property that nobody even knows about.
Yeah, that better be one of the pewter figures is the turtle, because only like 4 people are going to understand what that means. That is it for headlines for this week. Let's move into our next section. Let's talk about bundles.
I'm going to go through bundles very, very quickly today. Obviously, the Humble Bundles doesn't really have anything going on right now, but the Bundle of Holding does. And it is basically everything ever for Mutant Chronicles. Which is a game that came out in like 1993, very, very dark. That's about how I can describe it. It's dark.
Grimdark.
It is. It's very, very grimdark because it's sci-fi, but like they've opened up this door that let this evil out, and it's messed up all the technology, and everybody's very sad all the time. It's like if you put World of Darkness in a much more like futuristic sci-fi setting, and then took all the really fun parts out of it. Like, hey, all these political machinations are happening right over here, but it doesn't matter because it's the end of the world.
End times. You mentioned that you went through a personal dark period of darkness.
Yeah, well, I mean, this game came out in 1993 eventually, and I picked it up sometime in the 90s. But I was going through my youth, and I was Mr. Black Eyeliner, Mohawk. I was pretty sad most of the time, I think. And this game was a little too much for me.
Wow.
However, that being said, the license got picked up by Modifius, those guys. And they put out a 3rd edition of the game back in 2015. I have not looked at it, but they've also put out several expansions for that game. What the bundle is doing here is it's basically putting together all those expansions for that main game, and they're also re-offering the main game bundle as well.
This sounds as far away from the float game as possible.
This is
I
a
kind of
game.
want to check it out.
It's not like supernatural horror so much as there's a bleakness and wartime
belief,
quality to
yeah.
it, and
See, I want to do
I'm
this.
gonna go build a float. You guys can.
Everything is
Well, I want to wait, and
awful.
when all of my friends are like, you know what, my life is going great right now. I'm like, great, let's all get together for a game.
they actually have a couple of books, and if you want to, they have a movie too, Mutant Chronicles. There's a movie that came out. I think you can probably still get it on Netflix. If not, you can find it on Amazon. It was not a high budget film, but it stays fairly true to the source material, all things considered.
Neat.
Great.
Cool.
So those are your bundles for this week.
Those are your bundles. You're welcome.
All right, let's move over to Tifa's Kickstarter corner. Tifa, we'll talk about some Kickstarters.
Yeah, speaking of Kickstarters, I launched one this week.
Hey, congrats.
You can go check it out at tifarobles.com.
Wait, what's the Kickstarter?
It's for a young adult fantasy novel that was actually inspired by RPG video games.
There you go. All right.
Lots of pirates if you're into that. Okay,
Everything's
Kickstarters.
better with pirates.
Kickstarters this week. Props for Call of Cthulhu, called The Props of Nyarlathotep.
Sure. Sure.
Nailed
That's.
it.
I mean, that's anything regarding Cthulhu.
It looks like Nyarlathotep.
Wow. Yeah.
Derek is giving me the thumbs up.
I've worked with Stellinker, who
That just
designed
rolls off the
unspeakable
tongue.
words, and we just made up words all the time. So.
So for the Australia and Shanghai chapters, there's only 2 days left. So if you want some sweet props, go get those now.
This is cool. It's a thing that a couple of different companies are doing. Like Matthew Lillard's company, Beetle and Grimm. Non-infringing.
Beetle and the Bard? Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Beetle and Grimm, but they have some like really cool props as well. So it's a thing. Like I think a lot of RPG players, who play in person, want to really embody the campaign and have like physical things.
WizKids has been coming out with all sorts of like landscape stuff and like barrels and tavern pieces.
Oh my
and
gosh,
like,
it's just like so gorgeous.
It's great. Yeah.
I also buy into this mentality for my human who thinks she's a gnome, Numi Lumen, my D&D character. Eric's going to be really happy about this. This is a very positive mentality. The world we're playing in is very grim and dark. But she's very positive, and so for my props, I bought a unicorn sparkle journal and a purple feather quill to better embody my character.
Props make the character.
Yeah.
And your iPod's filled with Patchwork Doodle's greatest hits.
One of the things we do at my table is that, since we stream, so people can, and we each play different characters, having a prop for each character is really important.
Yeah.
And it's transferred over to our home games, and I recommend everybody do it
awesome.
if they're into the role-playing aspect of role-playing games, that is.
Well, the great thing about props is like you can use these Call of Cthulhu luxury items in a different campaign. Like it's not like you can't use them in a different setting.
Yeah, but character props at a table is one of those cool things where you could, even if you're not focused on character, you can take one look at that and like, oh wait, that's who I am.
Yeah.
And it's a nice
It's like a talisman.
a marker.
For your
Everybody can see you and
character.
exactly and know who you are.
Also ending in 2 days, Millennial Blades Collusion. It's the final expansion for Millennium Blades, wrapping up that universe. There's over 400 new cards, 6 characters, team mode, and more. If you're not familiar, it's a board and card game that simulates competitive CCG experience, and it's very meta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we just take a moment to let that sink in.
It's a board game about a card game.
Simulates the competitive CCG. So already like hyper niche, hyper nerd thing where it's like this is simulating you being a professional Magic the Gathering, for example.
So I can
player.
pretend to be good enough at card games to play against you guys.
This is the face-off of board games. This is John Travolta playing Nick Cage playing John Travolta.
But in a universe where this is a like a Dragon Ball Z or something, where you're like in a universe where this is a very serious and like important role for you.
And it's ending.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
It's done.
This is it.
Until the final.
Yeah. Until the
Until the final.
Until the
Actually,
reunion
really-
tour and
Right.
the goodbye tour.
And it's got a lot of cool pop culture references and stuff. I really want to play, but my friends think it's too dorky.
Well, look at all of us. We're a table full of dorks.
Yeah.
And I love anything meta.
My Magic playing like gamer friends think it's.
Plus, the game is called Millennium Blades. Like, hey, what's the absolute coolest name we can think of?
All right, next, Girl Underground. This looked really awesome. So it's one of the zine quests, which this is the first zine quest one that I was super excited about. Whimsical fantasy, sort of inspired by Alice in Wonderland,
Nice.
Wizard of Oz sort of theme. Tabletop RPG about a curious girl in a wondrous world. It's based on, the engine itself is based on the Apocalypse engine, powered by the Apocalypse. This Kickstarter ends in 4 days.
I love the Apocalypse engine. I'm just going to go on record. It's my one of my new favorites.
I don't know much about it. I would love to.
Very,
know
very
more.
story driven. You have traits. You make your characters together as
Yes,
a group.
yeah.
You have you establish your relationships long before you start playing. You roll 2 dice. You add 1 or 2 or take away 1 from it. That's your number. That's what you're doing. You can have basically 4 actions that you can do, like overcoming obstacles, investigating mysteries, and it's one of those 4 actions. No matter what you're doing anywhere, it plays very, very quickly. Combat doesn't take any time at all. It's all narrative focused and very, very story driven. It's like playing D&D without all the grid maps. And
This sounds like it's
a wonderful, wonderful
would
game, and
love
every
this.
version of it that I've played, because there are several versions, have been excellent.
You can back it, right?
I'm a big fan of Monster of the Week currently. I'm playing
nice.
a campaign of that at home right now.
and whimsical fantasy. Like I just want to dress up for this campaign, which would just get me more in character.
I would wear the prettiest dress ever.
This sounds super awesome, and I'm planning on backing it as soon as we're done.
Yeah. More TableTakes wallets.
Yeah, mine got hit last week. I ended up buying Nyctophobia.
Nyctophobia, I saw
bought
that.
Nyctophobia after we talked about it last week.
Another Zine Quest one, Pound of Flesh, module for Mothership Sci-Fi Horror RPG.
The opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah. So Mothership was like a pamphlet that folded into a rule book. If you're not familiar, but sci-fi horror, which again very different from what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
There's still 6 days left on this one, so a little bit more time. A location guide and adventure ideas for Mothership.
Yeah, again, you're going to want to have Mothership if this is something you're interested in buying.
Yeah, and the base game
Supplements.
can be found in a lot of places. Yeah, anyone have more
No.
thoughts on that? Great.
Yeah, we're good.
Yep.
I know nothing about it.
Enough
And sci-fi horror, like those two things together always scare me because I watched Alien way too young.
Nice.
A game I know both Emma and I are very excited for, the period game.
Period game.
Which is exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It's got punctuation?
Nice.
Well, it's like the punctuation of your month when
So like
something.
Friday.
Yeah, sure.
So it's a very educational, menstruation-based game. I think it's super important because I feel like we need to normalize women's health
Yes.
and women's bodies, and this is very accessible for a younger audience as well. So, it can literally be used in schools to teach biology.
Every school should buy one.
Yeah.
And Emma brought up that where you were talking about how the different tiers, that there's a
Yes.
specific tier.
So it's really cool because you can back to get the game, which is super awesome, but you can also alternately back to give the game to a school.
Yeah.
Which is super
So-
neat.
Yeah, it's not a game you want to play yourself, but you want to support the idea.
Yeah.
That's a really awesome way to do so.
I don't know if I want to play it myself, but I do want to watch a group of 8th grade boys play it.
Yes. Well, and that's something that's really cool about the marketing is like showing the people playing this game. It's like it's men, women, boys, girls.
Not at
There's
all.
like all sorts of different people who are playing this, and they mention like, oh, we've played it with 40-year-old men, and they've learned a thing or two about periods.
I'm
Like,
sure,
yeah.
because it's not normalized in our society. Or
No, it's
yeah.
it's so taboo.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
when I first got married, 20 years ago, I was one of those guys that like wouldn't hold my wife's purse if we were out somewhere. I wouldn't go to the store to buy products for her because I had this like hyper masculinized ideal of myself, which clearly is not true. But having something like that, a tool at like a younger age to
Yeah.
normalize that for me, I think would have been a huge help. Which is why I said I would like to watch a group of junior high school students play this game.
Off-camera stuff you guys are
Because
missing.
half of them are going to be,
Yeah.
are going to be what they are, and the other half are actually going to learn something.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
I mean, the player pieces for this, it's like it is like a little plastic, like a little tiny tampon and like a little tiny panties.
And the art's like really cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's even like a uterus or like a
Isn't it the
fallopian
centerpiece?
tube.
Yeah, like I
Yes,
saw the
Yeah,
centerpieces.
and the ovaries in there. So
Yeah.
even just like female anatomy, like knowing what goes on there is very useful and important.
Yeah.
See, I only don't hold her purse if it clashes with what I'm wearing.
Yeah, that's where
She's
I
like,
live
can you hold
now.
this? Is like, no, it doesn't match my jacket.
Or like I'm already holding my own
The
purse.
missus currently has a Captain Marvel purse, so I'm pretty much carrying that around everywhere anyway right now.
I'll be like, oh, I'll hold that for you. It's like,
You mentioned 5 days left in this one?
Yep, 5 days left.
Back
So
it.
go back it quickly. They haven't got
with
their
the
goal
flow.
yet.
Yes.
But they're pretty close, so
Yeah.
you can go help
Great.
that happen. Wavelength, we brought this up every week, just bringing it back again. Telepathic party game worth checking out. There's 1 week left, so don't miss your chance. Casket Land, occult western inspired RPG zine.
Also Apocalypse Engine.
Also a
wow,
Apocalypse
all
Engine.
right.
So
Yep.
pick it up and play it. It's very easy.
So if you're less into whimsical girls and more into westerns,
Occult westerns.
Occult westerns.
They could
like
be
think like
occult
Deadlands. if
whimsical
you will.
Deadlands.
Very much like
girls.
Deadlands.
Deadlands is awesome.
It's
So,
such a cool
yeah.
setting, yes.
That makes me a little more interested. Quickly, we still have 8 days left on this one, but immersive battle mats for tabletop RPGs.
Dry erase, which is
Oh, I love dry erase maps.
Yeah, dry erase maps are my lifeblood right now.
It's just a giant book, 30 maps, findable, reusable stickers. I think is super interesting.
ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
the vinyl
immersive.
stickers, those are the best, and you can use them for tokens. I mean,
Yeah.
Sounds like a good product to me.
Yeah.
All right, so that is your Kickstarter corner for this week. Let's dive into a topic or two if we have time. Let's go ahead and let's do this first one there. Let's just jump into the Century games.
All right.
'Cause
Find my notes.
I feel like we are long past the Century part. So let's talk about Century.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been on our agenda for like 3 weeks.
It's fine.
Maybe
For a
longer.
while.
You know what? This is a new show. The flow is working. We're giving out headlines. We're showing and highlighting a bunch of cool stuff. And then if we have time, we talk about stuff.
So,
Yeah.
Century is made by Plan B Games. They also made Azul, but Century was actually the first game they came out with, which is, it's kind of similar to Splendor, only there's a bunch of cards on the table and you have your own hand of cards that you're sort of like cycling through, and you're trying to collect spices and upgrading your spices to the best ones, victory point based.
Yeah, Moxo is one that we would recommend. Like, if you've played a ton of Splendor, love it, but are looking for something like a little bit crunchier, then Century Spice Road is an excellent choice.
Yeah, it's a little bit more like resource management heavy.
Yeah.
And it had the really nice bowls, right? The bowls, the spice cubes, and like
yeah.
it's you talk about crunchiness. Like the game itself, it's just it's touchable. You're like you got all
Yes.
these little things that you can use
Yeah.
and do these things with as you build your engine. It's a really neat game. I just dropped the mic. I'm sorry, headphone users. That was just like poof, right in your ears. I apologize for that. My mic jumped off. It was that excited about Centuries that it jumped off my jacket.
And what's really cool about Century is from the very beginning, they planned 3 games in the series. The second one is Eastern Wonders, which introduced tile placing. And you could play Eastern Wonders either standalone by itself, or you can combine the two.
Yes.
And Eastern Wonders is very similar to like Settlers of Catan, where you're building like little settlements and boats. And what's really cool is when you combine the 2 games, you're kind of playing both games, but that changes the strategy because you can't just do one of them well. You have to make decisions to make sure that you're strategizing in both areas successfully.
See, so that's really interesting to me because it's not like oh, you're playing this game now with these rules. It's you're literally doing both. You're collecting spices to then pick up and deliver in this other game and
Yep.
like doing these.
Yeah.
So it's really unique. And you said they've done this from the start.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
this has always been the plan. And so to me, that is a giant roadmap for game companies to figure out
Yeah.
and design. And not only that, hope that the game is successful. Well, the nice thing about it is even if your first game isn't successful, you've at least got your standalone game.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think banking on the fact that this game will be successful, that we can do these other 2 additions, because I mean,
Well, and
people-
they're all standalone.
Yeah.
So like
That's
if you're
what-
not, if Spice Road doesn't appeal to you, but territory building and area control does appeal to you, you can just get that.
Well, it's funny. I remember talking to Emerson a few years ago, who is a lovely human being, probably one of the best human beings. Awesome, totally supportive of designers, totally humble, amazing as a designer. But he had mentioned this fact that it's like, oh yeah, it's going to be this whole series of games, and we didn't even mention Century Golem, which is
yeah.
Century Spice Road. Literally the same game, rethemed to have like awesome, like sparkly gems, and you're creating golems.
The art is
That sounds
so
way more
cool.
up my alley.
Yeah,
I mean, I
it's
love spices,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. But making monsters sounds way more fun.
yeah, the artwork for that, I've seen the artwork of that is really, really pretty.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was cool to see this kind of unfolding, whereas that was the plan all along. You know, like there's this. He sold basically this whole series of games for them with this interlocking, interweaving craziness.
Yeah, well, and now they've announced the third one, A New World, which is going to be.
Give your notes from like weeks ago.
Yeah, this is why a different.
No?
What are you pointing at?
That was what it said. Build outposts. Is that?
No, that's the Eastern
that's
Wonders.
There you go. Your notes are everywhere.
Sorry, A New World is. Oh, I don't think we know what it's doing
Yeah,
yet.
just
That's what-
engine building.
Yeah, so
Or
it'll,
yeah.
so it'll be combining a third element into this game where you bring. Now you have to try to do 3 different games if you want to combine them all, which is just like really exciting. And I like that you can either play 3, sort of simple-ish games, or 1 very complex games with all 3 together.
Yeah.
And this will eventually culminate in, of course, a Golems versus Spice Merchants game.
Right, yeah. Well, I was saying, like, that'd be really neat. I would
Golems
love,
attacking
I would love to
spice
see
cards.
if some of these other games get reskins, because it'd be neat to combine the different ones. Like the golem, like you're gonna build golems and then get your outpost to deliver your golems to somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And then to see what happens. But then, like, what if it's something different? It's really neat to see. I just hope we see a reskin of these other ones because I want to combine them all.
Honestly, it makes me wonder if other game companies are going to emulate this and be like, oh, we can do 3 standalone games that are very different, but that also can combine.
It's interesting from a marketability perspective because once you, even getting into something as simple as expansions, once you know all this stuff is out there, as a first-time consumer, or as like a less knowledgeable consumer, it can be a little overwhelming. Like when it was just Century Spice Road, it's like, oh, this is the game, Century Spice. And then it became Century and Gollum, and explaining that to people was always a thing. It's like, oh, play Century Gollum. It's like, oh, I want to play Century Spice Road. I'm like, this is literally the same game. It is absolutely the same. It's not even like a modification.
Right.
Like, out of the box, same. People like, okay, and then they kind of like either one, but then if they liked Gollum, like I don't think it's actually going to have the whole series thing to it. So it's like, oh, but I have Gollum, but now it won't combine with the other 2 games.
Right.
And
So what we need is a quick conversion guide between Gollum and spices.
Gollum's
One
just
stone
spices.
Gollum equals this much coriander.
Do you think this will go the way of Fresco and Alhambra, where eventually you'll see like the Century, the big box?
The big box. Oh my gosh, and then the big box too. It's like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
some people really like the big box, but then also other people are just like, I need all of this to play. So it's a very fascinating from like a publishing and design perspective.
I think the design perspective is particularly interesting because you have to create 3 great games and then figure out how they can all work together and still be a good game and not just be like weird.
Oh yeah, it's an incredible design challenge.
See, I like the big box for reasons if you get into games late. Like we got into Alhambra and Fresco really late, so when we were given them,
I did not get into Fresco.
Sorry. Oh, I got into Alhambra late.
She was on the cutting edge.
She had played Fresco, but we
before school.
hadn't purchased any of the games of the expansion. So when you didn't because we got those as a wedding
It's
gift.
probably too poor. I was working in retail when Fresco came out.
But so we got those as wedding gifts, and we got the Fresco big box and the
a good
Alhambra
wedding
big
gift.
box as we actually had our wedding registry at Mark's
Wait,
wedding.
wait, you can get board games as wedding gifts?
Yeah.
Shoot, I did this elopement thing wrong.
I got
Can you
Nerf
get like,
guns. That was the way to go.
Oh,
See,
that's
there you
cool.
go.
can you get retcon? If you like throw a wedding
Retcon your
after,
registries.
You can still throw a
still
wedding.
throw a wedding
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
get board games.
His sister
I don't
did
know where I
their
put
wedding
them,
like
but
10 years after they
They
got
did
married.
do that.
Okay,
That's right.
cool.
But so that's so there you go. Century Games has the third expansion
Board
announced.
games in my eyes.
We're all very much looking forward to it. We already own Spice Road, but like the idea, if they did a big box and it was like you get the Gollum in this one, then I'm like, all right, we'll get the big box.
Yeah.
Well,
I
and
want Golems.
it's fantastic. Fantastic designer, fantastic game.
Yeah.
Definitely worth checking out.
There you go. That's going to be it for this week's Table Talks presented by Gen Con.
Table Talks.
Table Talks. This is a
Table
table talk.
Talks.
We talked on tables. We
talked on
Table Takes.
Hashtag TableTakes presented by Gen Con. We'll be back next week.
Tabletop talk takes.
Folks, if they want to find you on the internet, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Tifa Robles, or you can go to tifarobles.com and check out my Kickstarter.
Yes. I'm at Emma Larkins pretty much everywhere. On Twitter is a good place to get in touch with me. I have my website and also on Twitch, Emma Larkins.
You're streaming a lot more now.
Yeah, I'm doing more regular schedule, so I'm actually planning on streaming some Magic the Gathering Arena later tonight.
Fun.
Yeah.
And you can find me on Twitter at Crash Jackson, and every week on the Zoe Twitch channel.
Sweet.
There you go. And I am the Mike Robles. We'll see you all next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.